I'm Debbie Nelson. I'm the Dean of the Division of the Humanities. I'm here to welcome our guest speaker, who is one of you. She is one of these passionate people who loves to talk about learning language as well as language. So welcome everyone. Today, March 27th, is the International Day of Multilingualism. I did not know. Thanks, Cassie. March 27th was chosen because March 27th, 196 BC, is the date mentioned on the famously multilingual Rosetta Stone, engraved with ancient Egyptian in both hieroglyphic and demotic texts, and ancient Greek. What better day to welcome Steve Leveen to our campus? Steve is the author of America's Bilingual Century and the founder of the America the Bilingual Project. Both of these endeavors dispel the notion that the U.S. is a nation of monolinguals and instead describes through an enormous variety of data points and interviews a United States that is abounding with individuals who know more than one language, who teach languages, who study languages, who grew up with languages, who are learning languages. He himself has adopted Spanish and describes his ongoing journey finding a place in his life where his Spanish can live and thrive. In other words, Steve speaks our language. Not only is he committed to learning another language, he actively promotes the possibilities of the United States' bilingual future. In the America the Bilingual Project, he reports on the surprising changes in bilingualism now taking place in the United States. The podcast he hosts features conversations with American bilinguals who are making an impact in their professions. The range of voices he has included in America's Bilingual Century will resonate with you no matter what your bilingual journey is or has been. While this audience is sympathetic to Steve's messages, he also promises to challenge some of our perceptions and ultimately the frame within which we teach our students, along with the view of the bilingual world they will enter. We hear so much negative news about language learning, cratering enrollments, shifts in the goals of our learners, challenges to higher education for both language and humanities majors. I invite you now to hear a fresh and exceedingly well-informed perspective that will challenge that view. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Dean Nelson, and thank you, Kathy, for inviting me here. Thank you, Vanessa, for doing all the arrangements. And I've been so impressed. I mean, I was prepared to be impressed, but I've been more impressed than I was prepared for. And I'm afraid I've already learned more from you than you're likely to learn from me. But I will try to surprise you a little bit. So I also want to thank you for getting me out of Florida for a few days. We can talk more about that over cocktails, okay? And speaking up a little bit, okay, and maybe we can. All right, and I also want to thank you for coming inside on a day like this. What a beautiful day outside. Anyhow, let me tell you a little bit about myself so to give you some perspective. I have an undergraduate degree in biology and then a PhD in sociology, which I got as a young guy. And my first job was as a science writer in New York City for McGraw-Hill. And I loved writing about science, learning about things, and writing about it for a general audience. When I moved to New York City, I met another young person, a young woman, and she and I were both in the lowest rungs of corporate America, and decided that maybe we could earn a little bit more money, so at least we could buy some bagels, if we started a business. It was a harebrained idea, particularly since neither my wife Lori nor I had any business courses at all. But we did eventually start a business. We put our names together and we came up with this business called Leveen. Put an ad in the New Yorker magazine, a one-inch ad that said tools for serious readers. And miraculously, it actually succeeded. And I became a businessman, much to my mother's disappointment. But that's what I did for my career until about 15 years ago, when I woke up one morning with a powerful thirst to cure my monolingualism. And I decided I was going to learn Spanish. And I used every method I could find or buy. I tortured many tutors, all of whom are in therapy now, but expected to recover. And then I would go to social events, cocktail parties. Can you hear me okay now, Vanessa? Is that better?
Raise your voice a little bit.
Okay. So I would go to cocktail parties, and somehow it would come up that I was learning Spanish. And oh my God, the things people said to me, our fellow Americans. And since you're language professionals, I'm sure you've heard some of these yourself, probably all of them. But for me as a newcomer, why bother? The whole world speaks English. Or why bother? Technology is going to make language learning obsolete. We're going to have these gizmos in our ears. End of story. But I also met a lot of American bilinguals. And now that I have interviewed hundreds of American bilinguals, I can report this to you. I have never met a bilingual who did not love being bilingual and for whom their languages were a huge part of who they were, often what they did for a living. If they had children, they were enthusiastic about passing on this gift of bilingualism to their children. So what was going on? Is another language in our century completely unimportant, the way so many of our fellow citizens seem to believe? Or is it hugely important, the way all the bilinguals I've met, and not just the bilinguals, but I met plenty of monolinguals like myself who had this thirst to acquire another language. So it had been many years since I'd been a science writer, but I could still recognize a story when it fell in my lap. And so I retired from the business world, and they had a program at Harvard it's basically a rehab program, frankly, to take retired executives and try to make them useful for society again. It's a year-long program. In my case, it needed to be longer. They asked me to repeat the grade, but not at Harvard. So I did the same thing at Stanford. They have a similar program. And you probably know now that University of Chicago also has a program like this, the LSI program. And I'm going to have breakfast with some of those fellows tomorrow, which I'm looking forward to. But seriously, it was a wonderful opportunity for me to interview some of the top scholars, linguists, social linguists, historians, historians of language education in America. And the more I learned, the more intrigued I became. And so I started a project. This is the homepage for our project, the America the Bilingual Project. Our mission is to inform and inspire about what's going on in bilingualism in America, because it's surprising. So we do have a podcast. We interview some well-known people. This is Amy Chua. Some of you may have heard of the original Tiger Mom, the Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother. She's also a serious scholar. She's written many books about migration that I've enjoyed. I interviewed her in her office at Yale Law School. I can report that she has a stuffed baby tiger in her office. It's probably the only plush in Yale Law School. And then we interview people who are not known at all, but ought to be, like this young man. His name is Mohammed Kalini. He has an amazing story. I encourage you to listen to it. I interviewed him at the podcast studio at Bowdoin Library. His mother and his brother were refugees from Iraq by way of Jordan. Somehow he landed in Maine, and his story is just remarkable. So the book I wrote came out in 21. Please assign this to all your students. The book takes a different tactic toward language and bilingualism in the United States. Instead of lamenting how we suck at languages, which has basically been the approach of so many books and articles in the past, it takes a different approach. And it's really informed by Cass Sunstein, who you may know at Harvard, and his book Nudge, and about how to get social change to happen. And far more effective than finger wagging is to say, hey, we're having a party here. Look at these people succeeding, having wonderful lives. Don't you want to be part of this? The book is text only. And we realize that so much of the story about what's going on in bilingualism in America is a data story. So we added a data visualization expert to our team, a young woman named Ale Torben, who's a Zen master at, you'll see some of her work here. And started doing some data visualizations. And I wanted to start with the most depressing data I have. Because this is the University of Chicago. I know depressing data is welcome here. And this is something that you're all pretty familiar with. This is the MLA data. It's a long 95-page report. This was updated as of last fall with the most recent findings. There's a lot of data in the report, but this sort of sums it up for me. This is the percent of students. So in the 1960s, you walked around campuses in the United States, the chance of bumping into a student who was in a language class was about 1 in 6. Today, it's about 1 in 16. But I want to show you something else on top of this. So far as I know, these data sets have not been shown on the same graph. They're unrelated. The blue line shows the rising percentage of US immigrants. Colleges and universities had nothing to do with that blue line. That was politics, legislation, economics, globalization, technology in a huge way. But to me, these two lines are important to understand because they point to a growing linguistic divide in the United States. And it's not, here's my slide for a linguistic divide. This is an actual rock formation in Saudi Arabia. Is that wild? But it's not the linguistic divide that we're used to hearing about. This is what this country is always focused on. Back in the 1890s, we started our census with what language is spoken in the home. And if the answer is not English, the next question is, how well do you speak English, right? And this has been going on and it's a reasonable thing for the government to ask. The government needs to be able to communicate with the citizens. This is still a challenge. It's an ongoing challenge. But my contention, it's not the challenge today. This is the challenge today. Between those who enjoy the gifts of bilingualism, including your students, and those who do not. This is new for the United States. It's not really a new divide, though, because as Guadalupe Valdez, a professor at Stanford, has said, bilingualism has always been a gift the rich have given to their children, and they still do it today. Private tutors, private schools, travel, study abroad, etc., all the advantages. What's different today in the United States is that bilingualism is also a gift that immigrants are giving to their children, and it wasn't always the case, and it's become the case today. So the other thing we've been doing besides data visualization is we want to work into tests and quizzes that are fun, engaging, educational, but things that you like enough that you will send to your friends. Some of you may be familiar with the Hans Rosling Gapminder software to try to educate in interesting, informative way. So you all get to be guinea pigs, because this is the first time we've used this test anywhere, and I appreciate your, so get out your phones, because I'm going to show you a QR code, and that you can scan. But first, I'll be saying bilingualism a lot. And as you all know, as language professionals, there's lots of different definitions of bilingual. The one I'm using today is this, that speaking 2 or more languages or dialects pretty much on a daily basis. Okay? So here we go. See if you can scan that thing. And it's not an app, it just gives you a link. You click on the link. I'm seeing some thumbs up. And you should see this question on your phone and be able to answer it. Is it working? Okay. Oh, I see we've got a couple of answers already. Compared with European Union countries, the percentage of Americans who are bilingual is a lot less, about the same, a lot more. Wow, 26. How many are we, by the way? It's 26. Well, it's still going up, so we'll wait a second. $35. Everybody in? Okay, here we go. Okay, so most of you thought a lot less, which most Americans do. It is about the same, surprisingly. What was that?
People adding their vote after the answer.
Oh, okay. Ahmet, you gotta make sure this is legit, okay? Because we get to the test first, and okay. So here's kind of the surprising data. This is the EU average, is about 25%. Here's some representative EU countries. The United States is 23%, about the same, couple percentage points lower. And these numbers may be surprising. I mean, come on, 20% for France, right? It's a little surprising. But remember that France is a huge country. You can live your life completely, wonderfully well in every way a human being would want to in France, speaking only French, and most French people do. The same for the other countries. Next question. The number of bilinguals in the US compared to the number in France. A lot less, about the same, a lot more. I don't mean to pick on France, but a little bit maybe, okay. Are we all in? Okay, here we go. The answer is a lot more. Most of you chose a lot more, and you are correct. Here is the data visual. Do you want me to go back to that? Sorry, did I go too fast there? Okay, now the data. The number of bilinguals. So even though the United States is at 23%, the light gray bar is the population of the US. To show the US population, we would have to have 4 screens to do that. So it's a question of numbers and quantity. And this surprises most people that we have so many American bilinguals. So I'm going to be talking about percentages and actual numbers throughout this whole talk. And it's easy to get misled by one or the other. Nobel Prizes, the Swiss are beating us. 3 times higher per capita rate of winning Nobel Prizes. Those Swiss, I'm kind of upset with those clever Swiss, except for this. The difference between percentage and quantity. And I've learned today that 99 out of the 413 Nobel Prizes in the United States are either professors, students, or studied at University of Chicago. That is amazing. Almost 25% of all US Nobel Prizes, come on. So why is the quantity of American bilinguals surprising to us? I think there's a couple of answers. One of them is cognitive bias. Availability bias, another Nobel Prize-winning team. So there's a little thought experiment we can do. Think, oh, this doesn't work on this audience. You guys are all, but I'm going to do it anyway. Think of a European bilingual you know, and now think, where did you meet this person? If you met him at the University of Chicago, and if you met him in the United States, if you met him in international settings, I would suggest it's not a representative sample of people from that country. So we're primed to overestimate European bilingualism. At the same time, most American bilinguals speak their other language at home. Most of them are hiding in plain sight or hiding in plain speech. Have you ever known someone and known them for quite a while and then be surprised that they speak another language? But cognitive bias isn't the only reason. Another reason is that this vast quantity of bilinguals in America kind of snuck up on us, historically speaking. So this brings us to 2 questions about history. Answers are still coming in. Okay, are we ready? Here we go. Most of you chose 70%, and 70% is correct. 35 million of that 50 million giant exodus from Europe came to the United States, and they made the United States what it is. Next history question. The U.S. had 3 major waves of immigration. The first was between 1840 and 1860. These are the people who came on sailing ships. Second, between 1890 and 1915, when a U-boat sunk the Lusitania. These people came on steamships. When was the third? Are you 27, 31? And most of you got it. It's the biggest, third wave, the biggest wave, and we're still in it. And it completely changed the United States. We know the 60s, a lot of things happened. But many of us, including me, forgot or didn't know about this. This is Lyndon Johnson signing the 1965 Immigration and Naturalization Act, which changed everything. Before this law, U.S. citizens pretty much said, we don't want a whole lot of people, and the people we do let come in, we want them to be more like us. So we want Europeans, basically. This law changed that. No reference to race, no reference to country. And believe it or not, it's hard to believe this from today's perspective, it had strong bipartisan support. And the reason is explained in this next chart from the Pew Research Center. This explains why that legislation was signed and what happened afterwards. This shows that historically, our percent foreign-born, as the census calls it, or immigrants, was around close to 15%. World War I, and immigration went down and down and down, and even Congress got alarmed and realized they had to do something about it. They did that here. I think it went into effect in 1968. 1970, when I was in high school, the United States reached the lowest point of immigrants probably in our history, which says something about politics today because of what's happened since then. And now we're back close to historic norms in terms of the percent. The impact this had on American bilinguals was profound. This blue line shows you the overall US population. It grew substantially in those 50 years, 60%. But look what happened to US bilinguals, 260%, from roughly 20 million, estimated 20 million, to the 76 million we have as of 2020. And it's not just because we have more immigrants, but because the world changed vastly in those 50 years. You know, critics might say today, well, today's immigrants aren't as patriotic as our grandparents were, who kissed the ground when they got here, and they wanted to learn English, and they didn't want to pass on their heritage language. Well, it's hard to argue relative patriotism, but you can talk about practicality. Before 1960, visiting the home country meant booking passage on a steamship. Expensive, time-consuming, very few people did it. Communication home, the handwritten letter, anybody remember those? Compared to what rapidly changed in the last 50 years. And jobs. Back then, English was what you needed. Today, I don't have to tell you. The professional, economic, career advantage bilingualism brings. And immigrants, being very practical people, like Americans in general, know this. And not just immigrants, but primarily immigrants to account for those huge. So here's where we are today. Everybody knows about the vast quantity of English monolinguals. Virtually nobody knows about this. Even language professionals don't know about this. So, do you guys know Richard Ruiz in this article back in 1984 about language orientations? It really had a big impact on me for clarifying the three orientations of how we view language: as a problem, as a right, as a resource. And we took it upon ourselves. As far as I know, it's the first time it's ever been shown in, this is called a stream graph. Don't you love that? And this is not data, this is me guessing, okay, about how things have changed. So language is a problem. 1950s, sending indigenous children to reservation schools, punishing children for speaking Spanish. Language is a right. There were some important Supreme Court cases that came out and defended that some of you know about. In the 60s, that started becoming more talked about, more understood. And finally, language is a resource. Well, the Department of Defense and the State Department always viewed language as a resource, even back in the 50s, and that's only grown with a whole bunch of other factors involved too. And by the way, the prior slide when I was talking about the practical changes in the world that have happened in the last 50 years. We also have to mention the science about bilingualism. Back before the 1960s, the science said bilingual education is bad for kids. It's going to confuse them, it's going to retard them, it's going to delay them. Monolingual education is the way to go, until a couple of Canadian scientists, Peel and Lambert, right, I think 1962, said, you know what, that research is not good. And in our studies, they show the opposite. And ever since then, the science has done 180 degrees, where not only scientists and scholars are aware of the cognitive advantages of bilingualism, but you can hardly go a week in the news without hearing and seeing another story about cognitive benefits for children, for the delay in the onset of symptoms of Alzheimer's. Ellen Bialystock, another Canadian. So this is a surprising thing to many Americans, but countries can have language strategies. Imagine that. In Canada, we're clear, right? French and English, very strong. And they do this for internal cohesion, to keep the country together. And they did it for the advantages that it gives their citizens to have two global languages at their disposal. Lee Kuan Yew, the visionary founder of Singapore, realized to make the Singaporean miracle, to be the gateway between East and West, his citizens had to be fluent in Mandarin and English. He wrote a book about it. He was a huge proponent of this. And he learned, I think his book is called The Bilingual Journey, My Bilingual Journey. He had to learn a lot going through this process too. And in Morocco, historically, the educated elite in Morocco were educated in France, and it was the language of the elite. Arabic is the main language there, in addition to the Berber or Amazigh languages. And they were recently of pushing English in a big way, to be the gateway to Africa, especially European gateway to Africa. So it makes you wonder, if we had a language strategy, what would it be? You're shaking your head, Kathy. Well, we might look at what we have today. Let's start looking at the composition of American bilinguals. This rectangle shows them all of them. It's no surprise that Spanish is fully 2/3 of American bilinguals are Spanish-English bilinguals, which I consider a huge strategic advantage to this country. Why? This bubble graph shows the quantity of Spanish speakers in the Western Hemisphere. So the US is either number 2 or number 4, depending on how you count. But the next one I want to show you, watch when this changes to not Spanish speakers, but Spanish-English bilinguals. Watch this. Let me go back. Spanish speakers, Spanish-English bilinguals. The US has more Spanish-English bilinguals than the rest of Latin America combined. Why is this a strategic advantage? The key word is professional. And again, I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, but if you want to work professionally in any profession with Spanish and English, this is where you can operate. So what about our other languages besides Spanish? What do we think about them? And the answer, so far as I've been able to figure out, is not much. We don't think about it much, except you're starting to see some curiosities. Like, oh my gosh, we have 300 languages spoken in the Los Angeles Unified School District. Or Manhattan has 500 languages in Queens alone. Or, have you guys seen this one? This is from Visual Capitalists. It's the 3rd most spoken language in the States. And I'm telling you, you can have so much fun with this over drinks with your friends. Ask them, okay, what's the 3rd most spoken language in Texas? Most of them aren't going to guess Vietnamese. I'm guessing most of you would know the answer for Illinois, though. Polish. And how about Arabic in Michigan and Ohio? Anyway, so we're starting to look at our other languages, kind of as curiosities, kind of like, I never knew that, which shows the diversity of languages and the geographic spread of languages. But it has me wondering this: how can we see a linguistic landscape? I mean, I use that term as a metaphor, right? But it's not like a physical landscape. You can't take pictures of mountains. They're people speaking things. Most of the time you don't even know they're speaking, or they're speaking at home. How do you show this great strength that we have? So, and we have to show the US in comparison to other countries. So I'm going to show it in comparison to the two largest countries in the world, the only two countries that are larger than the United States, and they're a lot larger. They're 4 times the size, both India and China. And then I'm going to compare the US to countries that are about a quarter of our size, Germany and France, which are the 2 largest countries in the EU. I just wanted to give you a scale here. So here's our next quiz question. Language diversity. India, China, US. Who has the most? Ready? And you guys, you got it. It's mostly India. It's India. And here's the data from Ethnologue. So both India, the US, and China are all in the top 10, which you'd sort of expect because they're the 3 largest countries in the world. But look, it's number 1, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, Nigeria. And this is looking at languages where all languages are equal. And they are equal. They're all unique repositories of culture and human ingenuity and deserve to be valued and preserved. Hundreds of languages in all of these countries are at risk of extinction already and are spoken by fewer than 1,000 people. It's an important way to look at languages and language diversity, but not the only way. I want to talk about the top 40 languages in terms of the number of people who speak them. It's another important way to look at languages. But first, the quiz question. Real basic, what's the most spoken language in the world? Most spoken. But it's the right question. All right, are you ready? Here we go. So it's both L1 and L2. If you picked Mandarin, you're absolutely right in terms of native speakers. So here's the data for the top 40. So 1.5 billion English speakers. Obviously, most of those are L2s. Mandarin Chinese, most of these are L1s, 1.1 billion. Hindi, mostly L1s. Spanish, mostly L1s. Portuguese is number 8. Yay, Portuguese. And you can thank Brazil from that. And we were talking about this at lunch a little bit. 40 languages. Next question, what percent of human beings do you think speak one of these languages? Is this quiz too hard? All right, the answer is, are you ready?
Yes.
Most of you got it. Less than half of 1% of human languages are spoken by 70%. Or another way of saying it, 70% of the world population speaks one of these languages. And these languages, because they're spoken by so many millions of people, have utility. Think of a young woman who grows up in Guatemala speaking an indigenous language. When she learns Spanish, she now can speak a language of 500 million people in 42 countries. Is that a life changer? Yeah. And by the way, when it comes to preserving languages, bilingualism is the answer. It's not that we wish her to speak only her native language so that can be preserved as the beautiful work of art that it is. We want that, but we also want her to have her doors opened up to the way they are when she speaks Spanish. 50,000 speakers. I'm using this number because it helps us see what I'm going to show you next. But I realize the 50,000 is just a number. So I wanted to contextualize it. Is that the right word? For you all. So I with the help of ChatGPT, and I came up with this. How many have been to Wrigley Field? It's a big place, right? But it's not enough. You got to add in the Chicago Theater, Chicago Symphony Hall, and the Ratner Center. And when you do that, you're almost there. So it's a lot of people. Okay, I am so excited to show you what's next. Buckle up. Look at that. It gets me emotional, frankly. And let me explain this. What I'm calling significant representation across the top 40 languages. Look at the US. 34 out of 40. And by the way, there's only 2 of these that are between 50 and 100,000. The rest of them are way above that. The next closest country, I think, is Germany, France, and India and China. And I want you to see something else. Do you see all the red in China? These are color-coded for language families. So the red in China shows Chinese languages. And India, these beautiful kind of amber-colored, are languages, Indian languages and of their immediate neighbors of the subcontinent. In France and Germany, we see these other colors, the blues coming in. These are European languages. The point is that these 4 countries, highly multilingual countries, are multilingual on a regional basis. Look at the US. It's one way of seeing a linguistic landscape. And we're not done yet. Now, here, what I just showed you was an isotype where they're all the same size. Here, the size of these little mountains represent the quantity of speakers. So here, the US is compared to the 2 largest countries in the world. You can see the Chinese languages, Chinese Yu and Wu, a little bit of Korean here, if you can make that out, a little bit of Russian, And this is interesting. This blue is English. So when the Soviet Union fell, as you know, Chinese said, forget Russian, we're going with English, and we're seeing the results here. India, you know, it's almost, their English mountain is almost the same size as the United States, something like 250 million. However, 90% L2. And I don't know, some of you probably do, the level of English speaking among these, I don't really know. But I do know that it's L2, so it's not likely as high as the predominantly L1 here in the US. You can see big Spanish here in the US, and you can sort of somewhat make out these little guys here. If you can, this is kind of a vision test. You can see something's going on there. It's hard to see what. Okay, now let's compare the US to France and Germany. I find it comforting that there's a lot of German speakers in Germany. And they also have a lot of French speakers. They have more French speakers than French have German speakers. They both have a lot of English speakers. France has more Spanish speakers than Germany, but they share a big border with them. So some things make sense. Russian in Germany. I was looking at that and I said, oh yeah, East Germany, right? And US, and they're starting to be a little bit bigger now, our little montañas there. Okay, now just the US. Look at that. Huge English, can't even fit it on the screen. Giant Spanish, and look at everything in between. And if this next thing works, you are seeing the American linguistic landscape. Each one of these big mountains is over 1 million speakers.
Over 1 million speakers.
Or close to it.
Yeah.
Cool, huh? So why don't we know any of this? It hasn't been a focus. It got me thinking about, well, how do we celebrate this linguistic landscape? Well, we certainly celebrate our physical landscape, our national parks, and we should. They're glorious feats of nature. We celebrate them in posters, postage stamps. Why don't we do that with our American bilinguals? Be a lot of postage stamps. So I want to show you this graph one more time that you saw at the very beginning, because the MLA data, the depressing news, is contrasted with lots of positive news. Let's look at a little bit of that. Dual language schools exploded in the last 10 years. Far more demand than there is supply. Parents are pissed. This is not a chart of the eclipse next month, although it looks like it. This is a hex map of the rapid spread of the seal of biliteracy. It started in California in 2011. It started actually as a reaction to some terrible legislation. And these Californians got together and it says, this is stupid. We have to demonstrate, we have to acknowledge what a resource bilingualism and biliteracy is. They finally got it passed through state legislation signed by Jerry Brown. And it quickly took off to the rest of the nation. We're still waiting for South Dakota, but I think they're in process. But to me, this shows, because this required state legislation in all of these states and the District of Columbia, to me, it shows things are changing in the United States. Perceptions are changing. I don't have the numbers on state seals of biliteracy. This is the number on the global seal of biliteracy. I'm hoping to make this 30,150 next month when I take my test. And this is open to anyone. AP language exams. You're seeing a big dip from COVID. It's recovering. If we had this back to 2000, I think there were 100,000 fewer tests then, right? It's grown massively. And the biggest numbers here are Spanish and Chinese, and they're predominantly being taken by heritage speakers. This is another way heritage speakers can validate their skills and demonstrate it to colleges. Study abroad, and by the way, I am completely floored by the University of Chicago. 40% international. That is so far off the charts. National average is 5%. Elite institutions are more like 10. 40 is like out of the park. So hooray for what you got going on here. Again, the COVID dip, it's recovering. Some data from Middlebury, summer language enrollments. Again, the COVID dip, but things have generally been going up. Boring slide. Not boring subject. National Security Education Program. They do a lot of things that I'm not showing here that some of you, I'm sure, are involved in. But one of the things they do are the Boren Scholars and Fellows. And the University of Chicago is the #1 sender. It's been going on for 30 years. The deal here is you get advanced language training in what the DoD calls critical languages. And then overseas, in exchange for those scholarships, a service commitment to the nation, either in DoD, intelligence agencies, or some government agency. Who knows about the National Language Service Corps? We're talking about this at lunch. Anybody know about this? Well, if you guys don't know about it, the nation definitely doesn't know about it. It's basically a reserve force of highly trained, certified linguists in domains. It started not that many years ago. They're on call for surge and emergency needs. And look at this. Since 2008, we now have over 12,000 members. They're all US citizens. Most of them have security clearances. Big change. Would this have been possible without the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act? Absolutely not. Duolingo. Started in 2011, went public 2021. Last month's valuation, $7 billion. 24 million daily active users. Maybe 20% of them in the United States. That's 4.8 million people use Duolingo in the United States every day. That compares with 1.2 million college students taking language classes. And I show you this, not just because it's Duolingo, but it represents what is going on with technology today. If we had the data, we would see a similar curve for YouTube, for streaming, for other digital language learning exposure and methods. And to me, it's a very positive thing. It shows how quickly things can scale up and make a difference. You've probably seen this quote before, but I think it applies here. So I know this is the slide you've been waiting for. It's been a big topic at University of Chicago for a long time, and I'll actually show you one answer, which I learned a few years ago from my friend, the philosopher Tom Morris. Discover your strength, develop them, deploy them into the world, the 3 Ds. And I'm showing you this because I've showed you data and data visuals. We have the data now to do the kind of new advocacy, but we also need stories. We need to be storytellers. And this discover, develop, deploy storyline is so fundamental to biographies, to histories, to entertainment, to storytelling, to movies, to superhero movies, right? The superhero, he or she is usually bullied. Then they discover by accident that they have a superpower. It's embarrassing. They don't know what to do with it. But gradually they develop it. And then there's a crisis. There's a personal crisis, internal crisis. There's an external crisis, like saving the world, for instance. And our hero triumphs internally, triumphs, saves the world, end of movie until the sequel comes out, and then we got to do it again. But so to me, we can start telling these stories that the United States is kind of like this young superhero. We're just barely discovering. We're on the verge of discovering this great strength that we have. And what will we do with it? Well, superheroes sometimes look back to their ancestors and what did they do to save the world. This is not our slide. This is from Statistica. But to me, I like this, what this is saying, because it's documenting one of the greatest achievements of humankind, which is the widespread, near universal literacy in the world. The light blue bar up on the top is the United States. The United States back in the 1800s realized we had a problem. We had all kinds of Americans who couldn't read and write. And we had all kinds of Americans, if they could read and write, it was a very elementary level. So we made a commitment to free public education through high school, which today we take for granted. It was not at all for granted when they made this commitment. And our European cousin countries thought we were wacko. Why would you spend all that money educating people who are mostly farmers and didn't need it? But it's what allowed the United States to become the country it is today, and to become the American century of the 20th century. So here's a famous Chicagoan, right? What should we do today? Here's an idea. I think we're ready for it. It's a big goal. And more than that, we all know it's good for the individuals. We know it's good for the nation, soft power, economic competitiveness. We know how to do it. You guys know how to do it better than anyone. So is it our duty? Can we do it? This stream graph shows what we've just done in the last 50 years. And notice how I've labeled English learners now as emerging bilinguals. I think that makes sense, right? And the blue bilingual bar went from 20 million to 76 million, about 23% of our population today. So I took a swag at what we could do in 25 years. Majority bilingual, biliterate. That's a big goal. Think of the different America this would be. America full of people like your students. So is America ready? I sense a tipping point. Here's our Secretary of Education. And I have to show you this. So I've seen that dozens of times, and I still get choked up about it. I know it's an advertisement. That was a Super Bowl ad. Sorry. That was a Super Bowl ad. It came out 10 years ago. Last question. Okay, here we go. You are right. We are both a world leader in bilingualism and a huge population of monolinguals. And now that we know both of our strengths, we're in a position to do something about it. So it used to be said that America was where languages came to die, right? And there was some truth to that. Before 1960, language shift in the United States was more dramatic and more rapid than in other countries of other immigrant languages. It's no longer the case because of all the changes that we've gone through, all the changes in technology and economics and science. So you have the data. May the facts be with you. And I do think, in addition to the data story, which we have to share, we have to tell the new narratives. And to me, this is the central one, that English unites us, our other languages strengthen and define us. I think we're ready. And thank you.